Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens, and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. And I am here today with Fleur Bradley. So thank you so much for being on the channel, Fleur.
Oh, thanks for having me.
She's loved mysteries ever since she first picked up an Agatha Christie book at the age of 11. She's the author of the award-winning middle grade mysteries Daybreak on Raven Island and Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, the Double Vision trilogy, as well as numerous short stories, one of which was recently chosen for the annual Best Mystery Stories of the Year anthology. Fleur's work has been nominated for the Agatha and Anthony Award and has won the Colorado Book Award, among others. A reluctant reader herself, Fleur is also a literacy advocate and speaks at events on how to reach reluctant readers, which, of course, is our topic for today. Originally from the Netherlands, she now lives in a small cottage in the foothills of the Colorado Rockies. So, what a resume! I love your the parts of your story that we can see there. So, congratulations on
Thank
such a
you.
successful run, I guess,
Thank
so far.
you. Thank you. Yeah, I've been very fortunate to get some recognition, and because there's plenty of great books out there that just don't get that. So I feel very lucky.
Yeah, well, I first found out who you were through the Pikes Peak Writers Conference where you taught a session, and it was to me one of the most important sessions. It really gave me a lot of inspiration for my own journey. And it wasn't exactly about reaching reluctant readers, but since that is a
Mhm.
topic that's so close to your heart, that did come up. And I thought it was the perfect thing for us to talk about today. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of that, can
Mhm.
you give us a little bit more information about how you started as a writer in the first place, especially considering that you confess that you yourself are a reluctant reader?
Right. Yeah, I didn't read for a really long time, and it's not that uncommon. I mean, when you're a teenager, you have to read for school, and I was sort of in that boat where, as a kid, I really loved to read, and then I kind of fell out of reading for pleasure because you had to read for work for all intents and purposes for so long. So it wasn't until my mid 20s that I picked it back up, and then I was kind of like, I loved books so much that I sort of thought, maybe I can write a story or write a book. I started with a book, it was terrible. And then I kind of segued into short stories and did that for about 10 years, mysteries, crime fiction.
Oh,
So that's kind of where my roots came from. And then sort of through an agent ended up writing a middle grade novel, which I had not planned, and fell in love with this segment of the genre. So for those of you who don't know, a middle grade kind of falls into the 8 to 12-year-old category. So I've been writing mysteries for those kids age group ever since. YA as well, still do short stories. So that's sort of my start in a nutshell. As far as the reluctant reader part, I am still, and every time I pick up a book, it's the same. I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's like a workout for your brain. You have to commit to the story and commit to the character. So that's difficult still for me. And I do look at, what same thing as reluctant readers look at paragraph spacing. Is there a lot of dialogue? Is the text really small? Is it a really thick spine? Am I really going to commit to this book for this amount of time? So yeah, that's sort of my side of the reluctant reader portion. So I think of those kids a lot. Try to advocate for them. I do literacy talk about it, about reluctant readers and why they're reluctant readers in the first place. And that's been really rewarding. Kind of a segue that I didn't expect to make.
so when you say reluctant reader, is that basically what you mean? Just that hesitance to commit
Yeah.
to a story, or
Mhm.
is it a lack of
It's
interest, or how
that
would you define that?
sometimes it's a lack of interest. Sometimes it's, I mean, we're competing with devices. That's just a truth. You know, TV or video games or just phones. So there's that. I think kids are different than maybe they were a long time ago. But what's not different is that a lot of them have a form of a reading disability. It's more prevalent than you'd think. So
Hmm.
sometimes kids who say, "Oh, I don't like to read," it's really because it's so difficult for them to read, whether they're dyslexic or there's a host of other um, reading disabilities, but that's the one that we know most about. For some kids, it's like a workout. So I try to equate it with, let's say I dropped you off in the city and you were saying for the day, oh, I'm going to walk around, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to see museums, this is going to be great. Now imagine if I dropped you off in the city and you had a broken leg and crutches. Now it's not so much fun anymore. You're more like, where can I sit, and how much do I really need to walk because I can't. And that's what the difference is for kids who are sometimes kids who have a reading disability will present as reluctant readers. So they'll say, I just don't like to read. But what it is A, they haven't found the right book yet. And B, it's harder for them. For some kids, it's just harder to read. Now, we can give up on that, or we can try to help those kids bridge those gaps, help educators, parents understand where it's coming from, because you really can't fix it, and that's not the point. It's more about trying to encourage those kids to find a book they can fall in love with. Because if you get, we all know that is, if you are a big reader, how great that is to disappear in a book, and stories can be the same as video games and movies, whether they're on the printed page or not. Um, so yeah, that's kind of that angle of it, as far as how reluctant readers present. And there's like apparent, you can see I sort of get on my soapbox here, but
No, I love it. I brought you on for the soapbox.
oh, thank you. Well, I mean, it's great to talk to educators about it, because it's just a simple awareness as somebody who hands books to kids, and that's the important part about those people, the literacy advocates that come to conferences, and people like just you and me. Um, we can help bridge that gap. We can help keep kids reading, because magic stuff happens in your brain where you're reading, whether you're an adult or a kid. And for kids, I mean, it's the future, right? All things that you learn are on some level in written form. So if kids are struggling with reading now when they're 10 or whatever age they are, you can imagine how they're going to almost get blocked out of college or other opportunities that
Mm.
come with being a reader. So it's important that we keep those kids engaged, because otherwise we lose them for other reasons, which are far more dramatic than just a book and just enjoying reading.
Can you expand on that a little bit? You said that magic
Mm-hmm.
things happen in your brain when you read.
Oh yeah,
Obviously, I am a reader. I'm obsessed with stories. You're a reader. We're both authors. So it's
yeah.
easy for us to say that books are important. But for somebody
Mm-hmm.
who doesn't plan to go into a career
Mm-hmm.
like we are, why is it still important that kids read?
Well, I mean, there's been studies done, so it's not just me making this stuff up. You can look it up, but basically they find that, for instance, kids who read 20 minutes at night, they'll be ahead in grade, just because the vocabulary expands. Your brain really, there really is magic that happens in your brain. And this is, I mean, hard to prove scientifically, but the statistics are there as far as brain drain. For instance, let's say you have a kiddo who's finishing the school year, yay, it's summer. If you can keep those kids reading, there's almost no brain drain. So no summer loss at the end of
Wow.
it, because it's just the brain retains more. Kids will do better at math, at sciences, at all the other subjects that have nothing to do with reading on the surface, but it's just because the learning is constantly happening. So it's all that sort of magic electrical connection that your brain makes when it's reading. It expands out into all the other things. It's the same as playing a musical instrument. They've shown that helps with math and with science and with everything else, because it makes your brain do things. So it makes it work in a way. So yeah, it's like super duper important. When I get on my soapbox, I'm like, please get your kids to read, even if it's 10 minutes at night. And as parents and as educators, guess what? We're the best example. So
Mhm.
sometimes we think what we say to kids is going to stick. It's not what you say, it is what you do. So if you're taking kids to the library, like I hear from librarians, they're like, oh, it's such a bummer because the parents only pick up books for the kids. Pick up a book for yourself.
Mm.
Show that you read, that you sit in the corner and enjoy that book, or that you're part of a book club or talk about books. One of the cool things that happened during COVID that has kind of gotten lost, which is such a bummer, but everybody was reading with their kids, reading aloud. Teachers were reading aloud. I had tons of school visits, and it keeps kids engaged because it makes reading not an activity that you just do solitary on your own in a corner. It makes it a community activity. So then everybody's talking about a book. You'll have a catchphrase that's in a book that the kids are saying to each other. There's just lots of really neat and cool community stuff that happens if you read a book together. So as a parent too, okay, so it's a book for kids, and I can say this, books for kids are cool. They're really good. So if you have an opportunity, if you have a kid, if you're a grandparent, say, and you want to connect with your grandchild, read a book together, read a chapter together and talk about it. The kids love it. All of them do. It doesn't matter whether they're avid readers or not avid readers. They love to be part of that conversation and to get excited about stories. So here, see, soapbox.
I I am all about it. The older I get, the more I think that middle grade, that space where
Mhm.
you write a lot,
Yeah.
ages 8 to 12, are kind of the unsung heroes of the
Mhm.
writing world. It's such a formative age. So many of the books are so good. Some of my
Mhm.
favorite books I've read in the last 5 years have been middle grade books. So I
Mhm.
would second that. Just a good book is a good book. Don't look at
Yeah.
a kid's
Mhm.
book and go, oh, that's like
That's for
not
kids.
for me.
No, if it's, yeah,
Give it
absolutely. It should
give it a
translate.
chance,
And yeah, and there's just a lot being published as well. So that's exciting. There's lots of different things. You can even get into a genre side. Lots of, like, I'm part of a group called Spooky Middle Grade. So they have all the horror middle grade sort of, and when I say horror, it's not like gore horror. It's just scary, spooky,
kind of
supernatural
spooky.
stories.
Hmm.
Yeah. So if you have a kid who's really into that, like the ghosts, they find that stuff exciting. Read a book in that category together. There's really good stuff being published for sure.
So, since this is a channel for writers, I wanted to dive a little bit
Mm-hmm.
into how you intentionally gear your books toward reluctant readers. So, the book of yours that I have read is Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, and I was
Mm-hmm.
paying attention as I was reading, like, what are some of those things
Mm-hmm.
that you did? So you have really short chapters. You have a lot of foreshadowing, more than I'm, even used to seeing
Mm-hmm.
in middle grade. There are illustrations, but not a ton. So can you
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about some of those intentional choices that maybe lend themselves to hooking
Mm-hmm.
readers that normally have a harder time? They're maybe they are dyslexic
Yeah.
or whatever the case may
Mm-hmm.
be.
Yeah. So you can work on that with as a writer, at trying to always have something happen in the story. It's hard work to do that, to add character moments, but still have this plot propel forward. So what I like to do is take a look at, okay, what do I want to happen in a chapter? Um, Sometimes writers will have a lot happening in one chapter. I'm like, well, break it up, to spread it out, have some dialogue. Are there really large paragraphs of description? Okay, let's pare that down, do the three major things. Now, I did not make that up. There's other writers that will tell you that as well. So if you're walking into the room, what are the three things that you notice? Stick to that. Your kid will fill in the rest. And it's a lot of that. I naturally do it because I am a reluctant reader, so I naturally write short chapters. Lots of dialogue. White space is important because it makes you feel like you're accomplishing something. The foreshadowing is there also because if I get bored as a writer, where I'm thinking, oh, this chapter feels kind of boring, then I add something to it. Let's have something happen. Let's have something interesting, or maybe you can, as a narrator, go, It may all look, hunky dory now, but just wait. And then the kids are like, ooh, let's just wait. So it's little things like that that allow you to shape a chapter in a story. As a writer, if you're working on something, you can take a look at each chapter and go, okay, what's happening here? What's my end goal? Where's my character going? That's your cliffhanger. And then everything else should arc around that. So that's a very simple way, but it's a lot of hard work because you have to look at each individual chapter and pick it apart and shape it until it is something that relentlessly moves the story forward. The illustrations, that's something that the publisher decided, which I love that they did, because it kind of bridges the gap between sort of your chapter books, like the R.L. Stein. Yeah, and I mean, look how beautiful they are.
So
It's so
beautiful.
cool. And it really is the most exciting part as a writer was for this book is, I mean, it's all in your head, right? So your imagination has shaped these spaces. And then when it came time to come up with these illustrations, I had to pick some scenes together with my editor, and she told the illustrator, Xavier Bonnet, and he did these illustrations, and it's so neat because the library looks like what I imagined it to look like in my head. So as a writer, just a really magical moment to have that on top of having a cover that you love and sort of having that enjoyment. The interior illustrations were really fun. For Daybreak on Raven Island, that one skews just a little bit older, so that one doesn't have illustrations. So that was a little bit of a different process. That book is longer as well. Something I like to do is take more of a cinematic approach, more of a scene writing approach to writing. So instead of looking at things as chapters, I look more at beats and visual moments. That book is very because one of the characters in there is trying to make a movie, so that book in itself is a little bit of the sort of Alfred Hitchcock tension building and lots of very visual scenes. So that's another way you can look at your story. I'm a very visual person. You can translate that into your writing. So just kind of how does it feel? What does it look like? How do you build that tension?
Yeah, there's so many great nuggets that you had in there. One that I meant to mention, but I'm glad you did, was how sometimes you'll speak directly to the reader. You'll kind of
Mm-hmm.
break the fourth wall and
Yes.
say everything
Mm-hmm.
looks fine, but just you wait, things are
Mm-hmm.
around the corner, which is not something that I see in a lot of books,
Mm-hmm.
even books for this age. I mean, maybe more so than say books
Right.
written for adults,
Mm-hmm.
but I noticed you did it a lot more. And is that something that you find kids really interact with well, like
Yeah.
in read
They,
aloud kinds of situations, or even by
the kids
themselves?
love it, the teachers and the librarians love it, but it was a hard thing to get past my editors at the publishing house. They're just afraid that it is too much sometimes. It's a more bold way of storytelling, so you're definitely inserting a lot of your voice in that particular piece. So for Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, yeah, for sure, that has and that's what I wanted. I wanted it to feel like they're almost like a British butler is telling the story. um, so that I had a little bit of fun, sort of tongue in cheek, and keeps it light because there's a murder mystery in it, and it's made for like there's 7-year-olds reading this thing, so I had to keep it, keep the game alive. It has to feel like that Agatha Christie sort of, a little bit of levity, a little bit of humor, a little bit of over the top characters, theatrical people that are
Mhm.
funny. So it's about the puzzle and it's about putting the pieces together, the clues for the murder mystery, but not really about the actual murder.
Yeah, I noticed that didn't it skirted away from being too dark, which I
Mm-hmm.
appreciated, just keeping it, appropriate for some of
Yeah.
those the
Mm-hmm.
younger
Yes.
readers there. But you did deal with some pretty intense themes. There is a twist that, I saw coming,
Mm-hmm.
but I could tell as a younger person I would
Right.
have been shocked by the by the twist, which is also fairly dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's lovely that you have all those mindful moments. So, would you recommend that other writers trying to reach the same demographic use some of those same techniques, or are there some that you would say, well, for this particular project, yes, but others,
Yes, I would
no?
say the latter. It takes a lot of skill. Like you have to tread very carefully, or it'll get annoying. Like
Mm,
breaking the fourth wall. My earlier drafts, and I do agree with my editors on that, is it was too much. Like I had
mm,
too much of it in there, and then if you're reading a book, the way that kids are consuming things, maybe they'll read it in a night. It's very annoying then to have this sort of narrator drop in. You want to be real slow and careful
mm,
about it. Um, so yeah, that's one where I'm like, I would not say, oh, go break the fourth wall because it'll help you with your voice. Don't do that. I will say that voice is very important when it comes to middle grade and YA as well. So embrace sort of your way of telling a story. Like I have a group of friends that are very close to me, and each of them has a different voice. One of them is more soft spoken and will narrate in a different way. One of them is a little bit more serious. One of them has a little bit more over the topness going on. So if they were to tell a story, each of them would tell it differently. And when it comes to voice, whether it's middle grade or YA or any other book, it's about you having the confidence to write it your way. So
mm,
embrace whatever it is that makes your voice unique. And sometimes you don't know what that is. Other people will be able to tell you. So you can ask your maybe critique partners, go, okay, what makes me unique when you read a story and you go, oh, yeah, that's Fleur's story? You know,
mm,
what is that about that person that how you narrate maybe, and it isn't always loud, it isn't always breaking the fourth wall. Like I'm thinking of Deadpool here. He does that. It's funny, but if somebody else tried to do that, it wouldn't play. So it's you have to tell the story your way. So think about when you feel the most confident about your storytelling, about your voice, and about how you say things. And that's when you sit down to write. Like, for instance, in Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, the very first chapter in it was one that my editor wanted to get rid of, but I was like, no, because this is the bookend to the story. That's it's had some edits, but for a large part, that chapter is almost exactly like I wrote it when I first wrote it, because that was for me a way to say, I'm going to tell the story, and this is how it's going to be. So it was me telling myself, this is the voice you're going to do it in, this is the story it's going to be. And I really had a strong grasp of what I wanted to do. So if you are writing, try to do the same thing. Sort of think about when you feel the least afraid, because we're all afraid as writers. We all think we suck. We all think we're not going to do a good job, but you will. And it's at that moment where you don't feel like, where the inner critic sort of falls away. That's your voice.
mm. I actually really liked that first chapter, and I'm a fan
Mm-hmm.
of cutting out things that I feel don't belong, but
Right.
for me it did set the stage
Mm-hmm.
really well. It felt like this kind of cinematic Butler telling me the story, and
Yes.
I had a very good sense of what I was getting into, which I thought was quite nice. So I agree with you, and not
Yeah, it
your
was fun. And you know what? Everything is subjective. So it also goes
it
for
is.
your critique people that somebody might go, you know what? I don't like this. Well, maybe you do. So then say, I like it. So I'm going to keep it that way. We work in a very subjective field, and it's very easy to get knocked off your axis by something that somebody says, even if it's well intended feedback or critique or whatever it is, it's still subjective. And at the end of the day, it is your story. So it's your work, and you have to stand behind it. So sometimes that means going, no, actually, I like that.
Yeah, it's very true. There are, best practices and that kind of thing, but there are
Mhm.
exceptions to every rule, and
Yeah. Hmm.
and ultimately, like you said, it is your story, and
Yes.
especially people who have written for a while and they have a better sense of
Yes.
who they
Hmm.
are as a writer and that kind of thing, then you can choose your battles and say, no, this is actually
Yeah. Hmm.
something I
For
stand
sure.
behind.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pivot a little bit here And so let's assume that somebody's written a book that they like. They stand behind it. They
Mhm.
had in the back of their mind that they want to reach these reluctant readers. They want to get, that 9-year old who's never really read a book for fun
Mhm.
into reading. Since you can't really, you know, or at least easily market directly to a child because they don't have, the money or the
Mhm.
means. How do you go about actually getting your book into the hands of somebody like that? I know that you have all kinds of strategies. Could you share some of those?
Yes. So we call them sometimes gatekeepers, which sounds kind of negative, but they're basically just the people that want to make sure that the books that their kids are reading are books that they would give to them. So I have, several hurdles, and a writer, but as an author, when it comes time to market my books, I look at, for instance, that literacy talk I do, that's for librarians and teachers. So that's a way for me to directly reach those people. And they can put the book in the hands of kids. Got parents, grandparents, anybody else who might be buying the book. So there's lots of different levels of marketing that I do. The awards, it is important to advocate for your book. So I try to, if there's a award category where I feel like, I can compete or my book can compete, I'll submit it. And, you still get a ton of rejection and still get a lot of no and a lot of, lists you don't make and things like that. Um, the things you don't control are the things that help the most sometimes, which are the state book list. So each state has their, or some states do, they have their book list for the year. So, for instance, my book Daybreak on Raven Island made it on the Bluebonnet list, which is Texas's library and school book list, which is huge because it means that basically there's a lot of schools that just simply buy all the books on that list. So you're just, without having to make an effort, basically you're selling a ton of books, but you don't control that. So that's one thing that's challenging when it comes to writing for kids, is particularly like YA. You can market directly to the reader. With middle grade, you can't. So I'm always talking to the people in between, unless I'm going on a school visit, and then I talk directly to the kids. But even then, it's not like I'm going by my book, because it doesn't work anyway. Whether you're talking, who, no, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, librarian, teacher, parents, whatever, kids. So a lot of it is more about having a good conversation about reading, about what inspires you to write the book, and that has a tendency to move books. Because so it comes with its unique challenges if you are a writer that who has not written in this category before. Make sure you understand the challenges ahead, and that it is just a different marketplace and a different ballgame than it is to write for adults. It's got its own quirks and challenges, but it's great benefits too. Like the school visits are really, really fun.
Yeah, and you're doing a different type of good for people as well. You can give to adults inspiration and escape from difficult situations and, education, a variety of different things. Um, but like I said at the beginning, there's something about the books you read when you're right at that early
Oh yeah.
formative age that
Mhm.
is just so important. And it can start that lifelong reading journey in a
Yeah.
way that other
Mhm.
books
And
don't
sometimes
necessarily.
your book is the book. Like, how you have that one book that really
Hmm.
rocked your world when you were a certain age, it just hit right, and where you felt like you were seen. And that's a lot of what, I mean, all books are like that. But when it comes to books for kids, sometimes you can be that linchpin, that person who shows to kids, hey, this is fun to read. And doing school visits is so great because the kids get to see, hey, there's an actual person attached to it. And if she can write a book, maybe I can write a story. Maybe I can, if I apply myself, where I have everybody has ideas for stories, the kids come up afterward and tell me all about them. It's so fun. And that can be your book. So it's humbling as all get out. I mean, it's just different when there's a kid who comes up to you and is just so passionate, and they've read the book and they love it and they have questions about it for you. It really is, um, that's why you do it. I mean, that's at the end, there's a lot of as you can imagine, because you're dealing with all these people in between, there's a lot of, I don't want to say politics, but there's a lot of business sort of side stuff that you're always getting caught up in when you're writing for kids. But the end game, talking to those kids, getting them excited about reading or having them tell you their story, that's just the best.
That's just beautiful. Um, well, for anybody who wants to find your books and maybe gift them to the kids in their life, or who
Mm-hmm.
knows, maybe you're watching this, you're 12 and you're thinking, hey, I want one of those. Um,
Yeah.
where can people find you and your work online?
So my website, which is either fleurbradley.com or ftbradley.com, because I wrote under FT Bradley for a while. So that will take you to my website. It'll show you all the books. There's extra activities for kids and videos on, interviews I've done. Um, so you can find me there. And my books are pretty much everywhere books are sold. So whether you're online or hopefully at your independent bookstore, if you have one near you, check them out and ask them. And they will get the books for you. And they're available in paperback, which is wonderful because it makes it not so expensive and a great gift. If you send me an email at fleurbradley25@gmail.com, I could even send you a bookmark and a book plate to put in the book so you can have a signed book, like if you're gifting it to somebody or if you just want it for yourself.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'll put all that information down below.
Yeah.
Definitely take advantage of that. My copy of Midnight at the Barclay Hotel is already signed, so I'm set and ready to go. But I love that you offer that. That's so
Oh
kind.
yeah, it's so fun, and I'm not of the level of fame where that's a problem. So that makes it wonderful. But I send out a lot of bookmarks and book plates, which is great because that makes it like if you're giving a book to a kid, especially, then it's a signed book, so it's always very cool.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. That was really inspiring and interesting. And I love the perspective that you bring to writing for this age group. So, yeah,
Mhm.
thank you so much. And for anybody watching, make sure to check out Floor's books. Um, Subscribe to the channel, of course, like this video if you like it. And I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Carly. Bye.